Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. Today's guest is a natural shaman, avid explorer, gifted oracle, skilled communicator, bridge builder, and ascension guide. She just shared some incredibly powerful knowledge with us a few episodes ago, and she's back to share some more. Welcome to the show, Unity Grace.
Aloha, Matt Belair. It's amazing to be here with you. Amazing to be here with all of your viewers, listeners. Just such amazing feedback from the last time we got together, and such a great, cool, supercharged audience that follows you. Such a great reflection of the contribution that you make.
Oh, well, started the show with flattery is always nice. Yeah, it's really good to see you back so quickly. We were kind of touching base since the last episode, and I know a lot's been going on. My friend Sandra Walter has gone through an interesting experience where she's going to share, and she's somebody that I definitely see as a very, however you want to call it, developed human being, very in touch to other realms, and I see you as the same way. And it seems like all of my very gifted friends are saying the same thing, that there's a lot going on the planet right now, individually, planetary. And so I'm just excited for you to come back and kind of share what your update is, because it's a lot from just a few months ago, maybe like 6 weeks.
Yeah, I think sometime in November we dropped in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what has been going on? What do you want to start with today?
See. Okay, well, sometimes I'm a resistant oracle. There's a story called Jonah and the Whale, and it's about Jonah, who was a resistant prophet, and God was speaking through Jonah, and there was things that would come through him, and he would say to God, I don't want to talk about these things. People are going to think I'm crazy. And so he got swallowed up by a whale, and eventually the whale spit him out, and then he went and humbly delivered the message. So in tuning in to your question, the guidance wants to start with, let's call it a false missile attack on the Hawaiian Islands, which is where I happen to be right now. And it's something that came through the day after I arrived. And so that's where we want to start, but I'm guided first to just pass it back to you for a moment.
Sure, yeah. Well, we had touched on that a little bit before, and I saw the missile come up, and one of my friends, Jay Campbell, is an admin on Decoders of Truth. So when the planetary stuff is going on, I've been in the conspiracy world for a while, and even that word is just like, what is actually going on? You get a little bit of information, and it right away your spider senses go up, and you're just like, what is actually happening? And so the Decoders of Truth is one of those places where I will have a peek and see what they think, and you have a very interesting perspective on this. I actually had on speaking of the missile thing, there was one, I think it was like this summer, and David Lone Bear Senepass, I know that you work with a lot of native elders, and David Lone Bear Senepass has been on the podcast, and he's the native elder for the Mi'kmaq Nation. And he basically shared with me in a private conversation that I think I can share, didn't say I couldn't, that he and his tribe of, whether it's ETs or whatever power that they have, had an influence in actually taking down those missiles. I guess 2 were shot, and they had an influence in making sure that they didn't hit their targets. So, in that kind of realm, I have no idea what's going on. But it seems like if you're paying attention to the world at large and yourself, there's a lot that's actually happening. And if you want to go on like an easier start for your Jonah whale story, we could talk about Dr. Joe Dispenza, who you just did another workshop with, and that's multidimensional stuff right there. He's showing you how to activate DMT. He's telling you can heal yourself of terminal illnesses through meditation. And he's talking about the difference between time, space, and space, time. And I remember going to his first workshop, and I know he's activating DMT and going to these realms that are, you just can't even put language to it because it's too much. You don't have language for it. And so I knew he was just scratching the surface of what he experienced. And in the advanced workshop, he just shared a story about how through one of his meditations, he was taken to a previous life where he was essentially a philosopher, talking about what he's talking about today, about healing your body, activating your DNA, connecting with spirit. And then he got put on this torture board or whatever, and they swore, they're like, are you going to keep teaching? And he's like, no. In his mind, he's saying, no, I'm not going to keep teaching. But he said he experienced it as the person being tortured from the witness perspective at the exact same time. And so, I know he has more of those stories, and it's from him doing the simple work, right? The meditation and the reflection and the honest seeking. So I don't know. I'll say that and give it back to you.
Catch. Okay, well, the guidance said to pass you the talking stick, so I guess the guidance is just sprinkling a little bit of intrigue with the missile piece, and let's go with that lead with Joe Dispenza, because it is a great place to start. Dr. Joe Dispenza is an amazing being. For anyone who hasn't encountered his work, I strongly recommend checking out his website, checking out his meditations, checking out his books and his talking books, and just really diving deeply into his work, because the beauty of what he has been doing for a long period of time is helping us break down and digest what we may call spiritual or woo-woo by using scientific language. And what he says is that science is the language of the day. And so that's why he speaks in the language of science. And not only does he speak in the language of science, he also brings in the science and brings in scientific teams for the work that he's been doing for a long period of time. So he brings people together. He teaches the quantum physics of reality, how our mind is creating and co-creating reality. And he gives us left brain information, because our culture, for the most part, or let's put it this way, the culture that has been dominant on the planet has been very left-brained. And so he's bringing in the science so that our left brain can receive information in a way that it's used to. And once we start to get the answers for, we all have mystical experiences. The question is, are we willing to allow ourselves to validate those mystical experiences as real or legit? Are we willing to talk about them and share about them? Or are we so afraid because they're so outside the box of the norm or the rational, the societal structures, that we're going to shut those things down and just say that it doesn't exist? So Joe gives us the left brain information to really digest and synthesize within ourselves a lot of things. Einstein said that the ascension of humanity would come when science and spirit would meet, and they would have to meet together in unity. And it's kind of like, I talk about this all the time. I talked about it in the last podcast. We have the two hemispheres of the brain, the left and the right, in these human flesh suits. And they do very different things. So we want to bring them back together. We want to bring the left and the right back together. We want to bring the masculine and the feminine back together, the science and the spirit. So that's a really beautiful thing about Joe's work. And he presents it in a fun way. He's very inspiring. And, he's very encouraging for us to push ourselves beyond what we think is possible. His most recent book is called Becoming Supernatural. And he's starting to talk about some of these supernatural experiences more. His last book was called You Are the Placebo. And for anyone who's experiencing any kind of illness or disease or, distortions, disharmony in their life, I highly recommend that book, because he breaks things down in a way that helps us to claim our power back, to know that we are the ones creating our reality through our thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And also Bruce Lipton is showing, his research is showing that through our consciousness, and I believe it was you on the podcast that were saying that, we're getting to a point where we can consciously go in and turn on or off DNA. And the last podcast I did with Brian Besco, he was saying that thing in a little bit of a different way. He was talking about activating your light body through, your Markaba, through meditation and going in and activating through consciousness. And so, activating DNA or whatever you're going to do to basically recode yourself or align yourself can be done through your own consciousness. And for some people, that's a really intense thought because they just haven't learned how to turn the mirror in yet. But if you've kind of just done a little bit of practice with meditation, just kind of going backwards, stilling your mind, watching your thoughts, playing with it, like, okay, put your consciousness to your heart. Oh, interesting. Okay, put your consciousness to your left toe. Okay, cool. And when you go through that process and then you begin to experiment in different ways and you begin to explore what's possible, then all of a sudden you have a whole universe in there. And that universe and what's starting to show scientifically is that what we create inside will happen outside. And so that's where I always use sport as a really real reference, because people who haven't learned a trick or a maneuver can learn it in their minds before they ever do it in physical reality and learn it quicker. They can learn it safer, and they can master it by going within and doing that. So we're touching on those elements. So there was a question that I asked the last guest that he couldn't answer, and I think that I touched on it last time, but I've heard consistently that we're moving it. We've been to this point as far as evolution goes a bunch of times, but we're moving into a space that has never, there's no rule book, there's no precedent. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, can you touch on that? I've just heard it a bunch, and I don't know why. My friend Crystal gave a good explanation a long time ago, but it was something along the lines where it's literally we're creating and there's no roadmap. It's like this time in history has never happened before. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Know what I mean, Vern? You're so cute. It's awesome. Yeah, well, and I guess the first thing I'm guided to say back to you is, does that feel right inside of you? Because I think it feels right inside of a lot of us right now. It's like the athletes. It's such a great description, but every time the time to run the mile is broken, that shifts something in the entire consciousness, the running of the mile. Shifts something in the entire consciousness of humanity, of what's possible. And so a huge part of what's happening right now is technology has allowed us to connect in a very different way. So here's a simple example. Maybe if people Google this, they can find it. Bruce Lipton, years ago when I went to one of his retreats, showed this video, and he got so super excited. Bruce is just like this joyful being, and he gets so excited about things, including donuts, his favorite food. He showed us a video of neurons in a petri dish. So neurons are brain cells. And when a neuron has what we would call a thought, it actually chemically lights up with a flash of light. And so this whole petri dish was filled with brain cells, neurons, and one had a little thought and it lit up, and then that thought got passed to its neighbor. And so it was kind of like the wave at the football stadium where, everyone takes their turn to stand up. It was the same with the neurons in the petri dish lighting up. They lit up like a wave. And then he was like, and watch this. And the next slide in his presentation was the neurons had been in the petri dish for an extended period of time together, and the entire dish lit up at the same time. One solid flash rather than a wave. So the external is showing us the internal. And that's the moment that we're at, is we've been finding collective thought consciousness around the planet. Technology has sped up our communication and connectivity with like-minded people. That's called resonance. I always say the universe self-organizes through resonance. And the only thing that's getting in the way is our ego, which is in the lower frequencies is programmed by the mind, which is programmed by society of telling us what's possible. So if we just get our mind out of the way and we start to allow ourselves to be drawn through natural resonance to things that light us up rather than things we think we should do, then we're going to become those neurons in the petri dish quickly. And whether we participate consciously or not to listen to resonance, there is a force of creation that is imploding within each of us, just like the caterpillar metamorphosing into the butterfly, where we're coming to that moment in time. And that's why we're feeling what we call an acceleration in time. Suddenly time doesn't exist and so on. Because we're all coming to one simultaneous thought together. And when single-celled organisms turned into amoebas, it was the same process of slowly coming together in groupings until a cluster of single-celled organisms were together. And the walls of separation between them dissolved in what felt like an instant to the single-celled organisms, and they merged into a larger organism which began to function in a unique and different way. So most definitely, can we say, has this ever happened before? Well, if we're using the languaging of before, we're speaking in linear time, and linear time, as we move beyond time, doesn't exist. So before only exists when our consciousness is connected to a past and a future. But what we find as we go into those states that you're speaking about, meditation, like Joe Dispenza takes his students into, those spaces are beyond time. What he always says to his students is that we're going to go beyond the body, beyond time, and beyond the space that we're in. And when we go beyond all of those things, now we're in the simultaneous moment of now, where everything and anything is possible. And so, once again, before and after is a storyline. Getting back to the center, and this is why the Sri Yantra and the I Ching and all the ancient symbols have space at the center. Because at the center of everything is space. And that's where everything is created from. And in time and space, it pulses out, just like dropping a pebble into a still pond. The pond is still, you drop the pebble, it creates ripples. Those ripples have polarity. They have a crest, and they have a trough. And so in what we call time and space, that's what our two-strand DNA is working inside of, time and space. And so we have polarity in time and space, a wave, up and down. Where we're going, beyond time and space. So it's actually beyond frequency. And that's where we get in some of those very deep states of meditation. And the beautiful thing about it is this is not something that belongs to the elite, or belongs to one echelon, or belongs to the wisdom keepers, or any race, sex, or color. Within is within, and within exists in each and every one of us, and it is merely a choice of whether we want to take that deep dive inside of ourselves, and there's many ways to do it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I was like gonna go out there with it, but I want to flip it back to really practical. So, the way that I'm kind of seeing it now is it is this evolution. Butterfly is a really good example, because when you're going around and you're being a caterpillar, and that's us, my generation being 30 years old, to above, and I'm not really sure what 0 to 10 and 0 to 20 is like. It's probably intense, very artificial, I imagine. You're more plugged in. But you go around your whole life and you're this caterpillar, and then we're going through this awakening process, or, that cocooning could literally be like the inner search. You know what I mean? You have to go in to figure out what you are. So you wrap yourself up in a cocoon. You don't worry about the forest and what everybody else is doing, the squirrel down the road, the hawk that bugs you all the time. You just going in and you go into this cocoon, and that could be the meditation. Or at least this feeling of change that's happening on the planet. People could be feeling it. And then you have this opportunity to come out. And the thing is, you're so familiar with being a caterpillar and what life is like that as a caterpillar, and it's very real. It's so terrifying to have this whole another dimension, because as a caterpillar, you're just scaling a tree, you're going slowly. And, when you're a butterfly, you have this whole another dimension to deal with. You can go up and down now through the air, and you have this whole other reality set that you can experience. So my question is I think that a lot of people can feel this idea. Okay, they might not have a grasp of the really, out there idea, but as a grounded idea, they feel something, they want to make a change, but they live in the caterpillar world, the regular world, and it's safe and it's secure. It can provide for their family. They understand it. They know when they move here, they move there. They have no grasp on what it's going to be like. So do you have any suggestions for somebody who is kind of connecting with it to have the courage or the ability to start moving in this direction towards a more heart-centered existence? Because it really is letting go of security. It's letting go of your whole safety net to go to this other side, and it is a terrifying ask of some people, or well, everybody. It's terrifying in general.
It is so true, and that's what so much of the collective is feeling now. It's the pressure. It's a built-in thing. It's why I often say that expression of resistance is futile, and the concept of maybe in the past certain powers that were created things to protect themselves from the coming of the apocalypse or whatever. And the great joke is that we're protecting ourselves from the outside when it's actually happening on the inside. And so it's like, oh, shoot, I put all this energy into creating, the bomb shelter, and it turns out the bomb is going off inside. Something I always share over and over, I'm sure I shared it in the last podcast. The best thing is to find ways to help us just come into center, whatever that is. And so the simple technique I always share with people: cross your ankles when you're stressed, when you're reacting, when you're triggered. Do the work, just like building a muscle. Cross your ankles, cross your wrists, clasp your hands, close your eyes, deep breathe, and let the waves go through us, because just taking that simple technique brings the hemispheres of the brain back together. Only takes a few moments, 3 to 5 seconds, the brain comes back into a whole brain state. And it's almost like allowing a shock wave to pass through us and on, versus when we're stressed, if we amplify the stress by carrying on the story, by engaging and creating more stress and drama outside of ourselves, by projecting that stress, then we're going to create far more ripples that have to be dealt with. So in the moment we can, this expression is coming to mind, the stop, drop, and roll, when if you ever, your Halloween cape catches on fire, the stop, drop, and roll. The thing to just kind of trigger in people's memory, the moment that we're going into our stuff, stop, drop, and roll, do the whole brain state, get back in the center before it creates a whole bunch of ripples, because those ripples are sure to come back to the center of the pond, just the way the ripples do once they hit the edge of the pond. They're going to come back. So that's number one. Whatever technique works for us that reduces the chaos and brings us back to stillness. And ultimately we may use crutches, we may have addictions that we feel like are supporting us to do the stop, drop, and roll that help us tune out and all those kinds of things. But eventually those things lose their capacity as well because we're still feeling the discomfort within. So at some point we actually have to face it. So it's just very simple. Number one, find a technique that works for you. The one that I shared about crossing ankles and wrists any moment we're stressed or triggered. Just start practicing it. I use this with my clients all the time and they go, oh my God, what was that? You know, we start sessions and someone's really stressed. On a scale of 0 to 10, rate your stress. Where's your stress right now? 0 neutral, 10 extreme. We can all do this with ourselves. I'm at a 10. I'm at a 20. Okay, great. Do the whole brain state. Deep breathe. Once we feel the shift, come out of it. Rate ourselves again. And people go, well, it's amazing. I don't really feel stressed now. I feel like a 5, a 4. What just happened to me? What just happened was you were given a tool of empowerment and you applied it. You know, it's like give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. So one of the things that really impacted me years ago that Joe said was we live in an age of information, and so ignorance is a choice. And he would also say, you know, a lot of the time we wait for crisis to occur before we decide to do something. And so he would say, now that we have these tools, why wait for the crisis? Let's start applying them now. So that's number one, is just use that simple tool. Like, we don't have to make it any more complicated. That's what I would say to the listeners. Just try it out the next time you're stressed. Feel the magic of the hemispheres of your brain coming back together. It will change your life forever, because in that moment we go, oh my God, there's something I can actually do about this. And that is the first moment of self-empowerment. And that's all it takes, is one moment of self-empowerment to start just pulling everything back in to the center. And another thing I always say is one baby step is a quantum leap. So even though we might feel like, you know, we freak out in the parking lot because someone cuts us off, just do the stop, drop, and roll, do the whole brain state. That baby step is actually a quantum leap in our life. And it will expand out, especially now, because so much of the consciousness is coming into an awakened state. So there's way less work to do now.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree. I was just going to give you a, what do you call it, logistic hair, I think, is touching your
What's happening?
mic. So if you do the other side, it's gonna be much better.
Is it hard to hear me? Got it.
It's just better because you get little tiny feedbacks when it's flowing through there.
A logistical hair.
Okay. I agree with that. Though when I'm explaining it, it is really powerful, because what it teaches you is that you are in control of your emotional state. You control your emotions. It's not the external reality dictating whether you're happy, angry, upset, impatient, joyous, whatever. It's like you actually have that. And the way that I imagine is like neural nets are what are formed when you create, when you're learning, right? So you throw a baseball as a kid and you got like one neuron connected to another neuron, right? And then you throw it a different way and then it's another one. And then over time you have this whole neural net around the baseball, how it can move, how you can catch. And so as you are going about your day and all these things are leading you into stress, right? And if you really pay attention to your emotions and how you feel and how often you might be stressed or angry, and you start to break that circuit, you're really bringing that power in, because the bigger the net is, the more easy it's going to be for you to find that way home, So if you're stressed all the time, so many different things can set you off. But as you start nipping it in the butt and just cutting that connection, then you have what's called neural pruning, where that stress and that reaction net starts to diminish and stop, and then it goes to the empowerment net of like whatever you want. So you might want peace and calm, like peace through the storm or whatever. So it's simple and it's very, very powerful, and that's what leads into step 2 of taking this wherever you want to go, diving in, creating, imagining what you want. But it really is coherence, and I agree with what you said about it's getting easier and easier, and that's been a pretty constant on the podcast with people that have been coming on, because this collective energy is rising. There's more information out there. There's more podcasts, there's more meditations, and we're just growing collectively. And so we have less, let's say, distortion to go through, less density. It's just a little bit of an easier time because we've had people kind of do the ice breaking. They're the ones forging and really setting down the consciousness and the gateways and leading the path. And so it's just a little bit easier for people to come in. So now that I've got you talking, I'm going to go deeper now, the other way with it, and ask a question that I would ask you to. If you want, talk about the missile and what your thoughts are on that, because that's wild. And we were getting into the Akashic Records, so maybe you can explain what those are and what you think about that whole realm. I'll just leave it very general, and I'll get more specific when you give me some feedback.
Well, great sharing. And how's my mic? Is that better?
It's better, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Wonderful.
My headphones are backwards, but I'll keep pushing them in. Well, and I love your neural pruning. A lot of the languaging that we're using is metaphorical and symbolic. So not only is it talking, but it's giving people images in their head. And that neural pruning is such a great image because, once again, it's just, step by step doing these things. And for anyone who maybe feels really stuck, just trust, just try these simple things because they can advance us so quickly. Something about the Akash. So what we say, there's a beautiful mentor on my path, Maya Nartumid, and she has been scribing about ascension for, probably close to 50 years. And one of the things that she wrote about years ago was that we were working from something called the Lesser Akash. So the Akash is, the library, the recording of everything that quotation marks has been. And so she said in her writing, she was a scribe for Thoth, who some of the viewers may be familiar with, but she said that the Lesser Akash would eventually fall away. So here's how I would describe the Akash. Think about it like a big library or an ocean of information. So we know that water imprints memory. Dr. Emoto showed us through his amazing work with water. And for any of the viewers who haven't heard of Dr. Emoto, go check out his work. Just Google Dr. Emoto photos, and seeing his photos of water molecules holding memory will transform your consciousness in totality, just seeing them. So the Lesser Akash, we could say, is the collective story or the collective sea we've all been swimming in, and it's literally dissolving away. All the archetypes that we've been working with, the planetary systems, like all of it is falling away. And so the reason it's getting easier for us to make shifts and changes is because a huge part of that library that ocean we were collectively swimming in was imprinted with something called oppression, which was a sea of our wounds. And, Joe Dispenza talking about going back to that life and remembering being tortured. Was that his actual life, or was he tapping into the collective memory of millions who have been tortured in a past history? And so that whole sea has been cleared because we've all been working very, very hard to heal ourselves. And as we do, then all that collective memory falls away. So the Akash is a collective library. It's the library that belongs to all of us. And we're moving into a cosmic Akash. We're returning back to our true birthright as sovereign creator beings that share a library versus people who sign up for a library membership and go into a library that belongs to the Congress, or a library that belongs to the government, or a library that belongs to a school or a university. What we're doing is we're giving those library cards back right now, and we're checking out of that library forever. And we're going back into a collective library that belongs to all, and all does not just mean human consciousness. Collective library belongs to all sentient life, all the creatures that we coexist with, seen and unseen, that our eyes, our current eyes with limited capacity to see only certain spectrums of light, are unable to see the teeming field of life that exists all around us. And so I love that metaphor, that analogy, that we're going back to this collective library, a library where we all work to maintain its cleanliness. We all work to do the grooming of the garden. We all work to check the books in and out, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going from being run by an authoritative state where we're giving our authority to something outside of ourselves. And we're moving into a communal library where everyone is mature and whole and responsible to collectively steward this communal library and to help it grow. And that's what we could call the cosmic Akash. We're restoring our birthright to be co-creators of the library, collaborators of this communal library, rather than the library being run by the state or a concept of something outside of ourselves. So I'll pass it back to you for a minute on that one, because it's fun to look at it that way.
Yep, that's an interesting way. Edgar Cayce refers to it when he was doing his channeling, like the Akashic Records. I see it as I've heard it before, as like all memory of every single thing that has happened ever. So I don't know, I do something stupid, not on my bicycle, Akashic Records remembers, like you do something wherever you are, it's just going to remember every single thing that you did and every other thing. Now, what I find interesting about that idea is if we are opening up to have access to the information of all experience ever by every person, this obviously levels up our abilities. This is like a 5D thing. I can, tune into anybody from wherever and get that experience and that knowledge. And one of the things I was going to share before was this idea that we're talking about, this evolution in consciousness. When you talk to or listen to Abraham Hicks or a lot of channelers, they say this is a group collective conscious. It's not, Matt coming down. It's like if I were maybe doing some channeling for some rats or something, and there was like a channel rat, and I'm like, hey, I'm representing the entire human species. It's not just me. Is that how you see this transformation going, where like we're still individual, but like the individual has access to all things, so we are regaining our sovereignty, but we're also leveling up on our abilities and our conscious awareness to create and to experience life and to build what we can imagine.
It's such a great way of explaining it. And that's why as my consciousness began to open up, I always just referred to it as the guidance. It wasn't like channeling one being or anything. It's just the guidance started coming in. And the guidance was so accurate with everything. I would look it up. I would reference dates and times and locations. And if the guidance said, be in the mountains in Colorado tomorrow, there's a shaman waiting for you, and I would trust there was the shaman waiting. So it is, let's put it this way, in an infiverse, when anything is possible, then we are antennas and we can tune in to all these different radio stations, all these different frequencies, and we can be and experience exactly as you're saying. As we begin to move to realms beyond what the self can identify with, those experiences are transcendent of something that we can compartmentalize or put into language, as you said, activation of DMT experiences and so on. The experience itself is so vast that it is difficult, or the languaging, our current languaging at this level is limited in its capacity to express the thing. And that's why at the end of the human story is based on 64 building blocks called codons. Bruce Lipton teaches about the codons, the proteins. 64 different kind of proteins to make up the human experience. So a metaphor that I use is, we're in kindergarten class, the teacher pours out 64 Lego pieces in front of each one of us. It says you get to pick 26 of these in your current incarnation. Pick 26 different blocks and go build something with it, and then pour your spirit into that and take it for a ride. And so at the end of that journey, the final codon, the 64th gene, is about turning the entire experience into art. And that's why we're on the cusp, or we're already in the implosion, explosion, expansion of the greatest Renaissance ever. Because we've gone through this incredible journey. This is a metaphor I've been using lately. We all sat down at the Last Supper together. We agreed to go down our own branches, our own experiences, our own paths into the forest. Now we're returning home for the first potluck. And at the first potluck, we just bring the finest sampling. We just bring the most refined dish from the journey out in the forest. And so the final piece is art. It's creativity. It's to turn that vast realm of the whole journey, the experience, into a creation that is beyond words, that expresses the journey itself. And that's why these past great renaissances that we've had in what we call the past create such amazing works that you look at it and you go, I know this is a painting. Why are people traveling from all over the world to come and see this painting that's this big? Because that painting is the distillation of the awakening process of the entire human journey. And so that's why there's, so many music festivals and art festivals, and there's many different ways to express art. Infinite ways to express art. It doesn't have to look a certain way. And so that right now is where we're going, as the central library of that's controlled by the state is closing down. And we're moving into this collective, unified library where we're all sovereign beings and we all arrive as the artists of our great project. And you could say that this library is housing everyone's art piece to be experienced.
It's a very fascinating way to put that. That's interesting. Okay. Just like last time, I really have to think about what you're saying for a bit to process and to formulate a question.
Well, why don't I ask you a question?
I guess. All right. What do you got?
Okay. Well, I guess my question to you, because you're such an accomplished being and you're so well revered, and you're an artist, and you're a writer, and an athlete, and you're a really activated, awakened being. What is your art project, and what was the greatest challenge to getting you to this place of this expression right now? Like, this is the thing people need to ask themselves right now. What truly lights me up? like walk away from everything else. And if it takes some time to unplug, this comes back to the question of, what do we say to people who are kind of like in their 3D life and they've got kids and all these kinds of things? Take some time and truly ask ourselves what really lights me up. And if it takes time and it has to be systematically done, begin now. Begin in this moment of now to unplug ourselves from everything that doesn't light us up. And, how did you do that, Matt? How did you start stepping away from that?
Well, first, thanks for the flattery. I can assure everyone I didn't make her say that. That's very beautiful. Thank you very much. For me, it's such a good question, and that's when I started realizing that I was a little bit different when I started to get interviewed on podcasts, because I didn't have a point where it was like, this is the way, like let's say traditional life is, and then I'm going to do something else. I always saw like the road of college, university, 2.5 kids, just the whole thing just didn't seem right to me. There's something off about it, and I always just wanted to know what I was capable of, what humans were capable of, and I wanted to express myself, in the things that I enjoyed. So for me, it was just doing that, just actually going out and following the things that I loved. And that's what I find interesting for people who are coming, let's say, awakening or shifting or whatever the case is. It's just mostly it's just dropping the baggage, and then once you move towards what you enjoy, what lights you up, the universe will have your back. And you can do it strategically. You can do it any way you want. But the thing is, nobody gets a free pass. If you're trying to, Dr. Joe will use the crossing the river, or if you're a caterpillar and you're now a butterfly, well, you got to jump off, and see if you can fly. And so the universe isn't going to let you have like your toe on the edge of the river and see if you can stretch your foot, fully safety over here and what you're used to and get to the other side. It's like, nah, nobody gets that. And so it's this commitment to the other side. And really where that comes from is listening to yourself and just really letting go of the illusion. I think that's the hardest part, because we've been so hard sold on what life should be and what it's supposed to be and what the norm is. And I was just, for me, looking at what the norm was and just so resistant, be like, that is a terrible norm. Like, there's got to be one other option that's better than that, because that sucks. And so that's kind of how I did it. And that's, I've been writing these little notes of just trying to figure out, what is the difference between like an awakened person and an asleep person, or whatever the case is. And a few of the things that I came up with were really simple. One of them for somebody who is awake is just that they're just asking themselves, what do they want and how do they want to express themselves? They have this at least level of freedom and self-confidence and self-awareness to imagine a reality that feels good to them. That's just such a basic beginning. So many people I ask, what would you do if you could do anything? What would you do if I gave you $1 million every single day? What would you do? And a lot of the time you don't need $1 million for that. You don't even need any money. And then the second thing is that once you connect to your passion and the things that light you up, it automatically becomes of service, because you never really get to a deeply fulfilled sense of being just looking out, just trying to get from people. But when you're thinking about how can I help somebody, how can I make somebody's life better, how can I support someone, that's it. That for me is it. You just figure out who you are and what you love, and then you think about how you can support other people. And you have to let go of all this baggage of, what you think reality is supposed to be. And that's, and that's why it is so simple, but walking the path is really hard. It can be very, very, very hard, and it can be lonely and all those kinds of things. So that's how I would answer that. And then I guess I would give it back to you and ask, for you, what is your, and I was going to ask this anyway, so it's a good segue, but how do you feel, like, what's the difference between you see somebody awake and alive and full of self-love? Like, do you see any distinguishing belief systems? Like one of them would be, I believe I am enough, which for me I work on. I don't really believe that 100%. I believe that, like, I don't know, it depends on the day. Sometimes like 1%, sometimes 99. But I see people who believe that, right? When you were talking your story last time, was saying I'm the walking embodiment of the female Christ or something, how awkward that is. Well, for people to say like I love myself, and for me to say it, I'm not at that mastery level yet, and I would like to be, and I think that's a really important starting point of when you see somebody and they are really lit up, they're really balanced, and they're really of service. They're not being of service in a way that I want to be of service because now it's cool and I want to look cool and I'm going to do this podcast because consciousness is starting to be cool and psychics are cool and mushrooms are cool. It's just like you just do it because it's you expressing yourself and things happen when you do that, right? But you just let go of the attachment of it. So I'll stop rambling and let you go.
I'm not rambling, Matt. Wait, I took my headphones out. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. The headphones they go the wrong way, so I can't hear you too well. It's such great sharing. And here's a big thing about just tuning into a podcast like this. Mirror neurons. And I might have spoken of mirror neurons last time. Bruce Lipton described mirror neurons to us. We have mirror neurons in our brain and they allow us empathy with each other. And so when I see something outside of me, my mirror neurons would activate, and then they would start activating the same chemistry in me so that I could get on the same frequency or level. So for example, if someone is angry in front of me, my mirror neurons would activate, I would experience the anger. And so mirror neurons, really, as we move into these higher states of consciousness, what I say right now is that heaven bless, beautiful, the Mr. President at the moment and so on, because that is pushing people to wake up and it's pushing people to their limits. There's so many things, crises on the planet right now, if people will tune into the news, that are going to push them to their limits, and that has purpose. Because eventually we reach our limit and we're ready to go over the edge of the waterfall. There's nothing to hold on to anymore. And what's on the other side is a whole team of us activating positive mirror neurons. It's all a trick and a great device called imaginal cells by creation. And so the more that this energy kicks into us, this is why I follow our bliss. Because the more we get into it and the more people that are following their bliss and in their joy, we're actually on the other side of what looked like a waterfall when it wasn't really a waterfall. And there's such a momentum. It takes way less people to turn on the collective than to turn it off. It's a big job to stop a freighter. To break the inertia of a freighter moving at full speed in one direction, that takes tremendous, tremendous power. Once that inertia has been broken, it takes much less power to actually change the direction of the ship, which is why less than 1%, when the caterpillar is turning into butterfly, there's these imaginal cells, and they're directing the show because source is directing through them. So the more of us that start to kind of catch our stride, then it just becomes fun to stay in this place together. I just launched with my friend Sandalphon recently something called PureEnergy.love. And what is it? It's just simple. It's just love. It's just play. It's just happiness. Because the people who are on the cusp just need those imaginal or those mirror neurons activated enough for their own biochemistry to kick in. We are the greatest technology ever. Our spirit is housed in the greatest technology ever called our body. And it's got all kinds of levels and layers of capacity, which you know and teach as an athlete and a coach. And so just like Bruce Lee wasn't a master in the beginning, like you say, you want to feel worthy enough or full enough or whole enough or whatever. So it's a process. and just never stop. One of the things I say is eye on the prize, just like you see the dartboard and you see it out there and it's always out there, and you put the prize on the dartboard, and no matter what, eye on the prize always, no matter what's unfolding around us. And the stronger and more magnetic our connection to that prize becomes, not from a place of attachment. We're not attached to the prize, but literally as like a hook or an ink or something we've thrown ahead of ourselves to start pulling ourselves towards. Stay focused on that, like blinders on a horse, not blinders of denial, just blinders to help us stay focused so that everything around us that may feel and look like chaos as our old life might be falling apart or disassembling, we can just keep focused one foot in front of the other. Always one foot in front of the other. And we're going to sometimes reach points where we weaken and we go like, this is never ending. And this is one of the things I shared recently, is when we reach a plateau in our process, stop and celebrate. Just stop and celebrate the accomplishments and the achievements, because when we just constantly keep pulling, I mean, a rock climber does not just keep constantly climbing. A rock climber stops on certain ledges to catch their breath and to look at the view. And so let's stop at certain points on the journey and celebrate. Let's stop at certain points on the journey and just, take stock and go, well, actually, when I think about it, I've come pretty far. I left that abusive relationship I had years ago. I'm no longer with the boss I didn't like. I stood up to my family and I told them that I need to take time for myself, whatever. But it's really about taking these moments to go out, do the journey, come back to the beginning, celebrate. And it's kind of like that. So leapfrogging ourselves. And if we don't do the celebration, if we don't stop and take stock, then we will guaranteed become exhausted at some point in the journey. Because it's about taking stock. It's about gratitude and appreciation. It's about developing our own worthiness by ourselves, looking at how far we've come. And every single being that's in this story right now has taken leaps and bounds, because we move as a collective, and it's only an illusion to think that we are alone in the process. It's collective.
Yeah, I agree. And I love the dartboard analogy. I had my brother come over for Christmas. I hadn't seen him for a while. We're at my dad's, and he struggles with different things, and one of them is just self-confidence and, not even wanting to try, and so I was just trying to explain to him and his friend, I was like, look, it's like, it was literally playing darts, and I was like, you can aim for the bullseye, but the idea is that if you miss, then that's okay, and that's surrender. That's just, I can aim and I can intend that the podcast goes out and it's for the highest good of all. That's why I set the intention, and I set the intention to interview people who are, conscious and loving and have wisdom and will share inspirational things to improve people's lives. I can hold that intention, and I can know that that's my intention. Now I could miss huge. And that is the risk of putting yourself out there for doing the thing that you want to do, doing the thing that calls to you. And the more you're afraid to do it, it's probably your thing, because you care about it. You care if it sucks. I care if it sucks. I care if people tell me, whatever, it hurts. I only get a little bit of smack talk on YouTube, but like even the little ones are like, shut up, man. Because it's scary, and it's like your work, and it's like authentic, and you're doing your best, and they tell you how to do it, and they're judging from over here. You don't, you're just doing it. So it becomes terrifying. And so if we can shoot for the bullseye, and for me, the bullseye is your highest joy or your highest service. And so if you could do anything and not fail, if you had $1 million in your bank account every single day for the rest of your life, what would you do? And life is a lot simpler than people imagine it to be. The problem is we put all of this crap that is not worth any real value on top of all the stuff we actually value. So one example for me was, when I first was on this journey, it was snowboarding. I just knew that I wanted to be in the mountains, and I knew that I wanted to snowboard. I knew that would light me up, and I did that for 8 years. And now for the last 4, it's been travel. And then since the last 2, really, it's just been of service. I'm kind of done. Like what lights me up the most is being of the highest service in my own unique way. And I get to snowboard and I get to be an athlete and I get to do those things, but the drive isn't the same. It's just created who I am, my level of experience, my level of expertise in whatever those things are. But it was my unique journey through just literally figuring out what my highest joy was, what my highest bliss, and that's like your heart connection home. And so you're kind of using your heart as this bullseye to source and just being fully surrendered, because you're going to miss. It's a part of the journey. And I use this expression in teaching a lot too, is like skateboarding teaches you that failure is not failure. It's you literally try infinite times sometimes to land something. You fail when you give up. And if your heart is aiming towards what lights you up, to, if you had a week left on the planet, do a shamanic death ritual every week. You'll know how aligned you are. Do one every month. That ayahuasca is like that. It's like walking through your death. It's like, oh, well, when I'm 60, then I'm going to do my passion project. I'm like, well, what about your whole entire life until that point, And so I see that people will really compromise and lose who they actually are through submitting to what they believe is more important or what is expected or what is culturally the norm. And it's challenging because that weight and that influence is massive. So you can comment on that if you want, but I'm going to go another way with it because I'm curious of your opinion. So I'm now on this I'm helping crowdfund what's called the International Tribunal for Natural Justice. And it's a legit thing. I don't even know what you call it, like an organization that's going to be recognized in all the official ways that needs to happen. I don't know. We've got a justice minister and politicians, and we got a bunch of people on there. They're going to be doing a tribunal on human trafficking, sex slavery, and ritual satanic sacrifice, which people can't even believe. We look at war, and I've looked at the deepest, darkest stuff on the planet, and it's awful. Last year I was working on something that was going to cover and do an event on the organ harvesting. And so when I'm looking at this, and I've been down the rabbit hole before, and it's so dark and awful and just soul crushing, I get sad, obviously, because it's so awful when I look at that. But then I know on the other side, it's like everything's all perfect and it is what it is and all that kind of stuff. So do you have any recommendations for people where I'm at with it is staying divinely neutral? Like, okay, if it exists in my field and I can support it and help it, I will. I'm just not going to lower, but I'm not going to ignore that possibility. So how do you invite people to go through the darkness? Like, it could be a very personal thing. Maybe, with this whole Harvey Weinstein thing and what's going on the planet, so many people have had abuse. Like, I was talking to someone today, and, she just was like, yeah, I was abused as a kid too. I was like, holy crap. Like, I wonder what that number is. If you just pulled up the Akashic Records and it's like, what, 20%, 32%, 80%? I don't know, but it's way higher than it should be. It should be 0. So what's your deal with that? How do I go into this darkness thing with divine neutrality and knowing it exists and not ignoring it, and then also at the same time everything is perfect, quote unquote, and it's the universe is sorted and I'm ascending and it's like a spiritual angel just floating through the clouds with unicorns, but in the meantime dealing with dealing with this too. So messes my brain up sometimes.
Everybody should have a unicorn. We have quite a few around here, and we name them all Kiss.
Oh, they're so nice.
Or keep it simple. And they're not he's or she's, they're we's.
You guys look awesome. I feel like next time you should have like one of those unicorn hats that I've seen at Burning Man. They look really great.
There we go. It's such a great question when we're working our way through our own storyline. Here's how I'm going to jump into this. Our body is the greatest technology. We are the movie theater. Our DNA holds the script, and our specific blueprint is the particular movie that's playing out through us. So each one of us is literally a walking movie house in this holographic field. And each one of us has a different movie playing through us. Now, this is what the ancient texts like the I Ching, the recent texts like the Gene Keys, it shows us. All the different profiling systems, when we go into profiling systems, it's quite amazing to discover that, in fact, our personality can be profiled to a T. And that helps us understand that there's something beyond who we think we are. Who we think we are is the Lego building block model that we put together out there in the cosmos before our spirit came into form. And we took that Lego creature that we created, and we're down here taking it for a ride. So, I mean, these concepts I'm feeding from a different level of consciousness into the collective here. But when we get into all those subject lines, how can we believe that possibly we created these experiences, horrendous experiences? How can we believe we created them for ourselves, or that we agreed to them collectively, and all of those things? One of the bundles that I was asked to carry for the indigenous, for the Star Knowledge family, is their bundles called the Star Knowledge bundles, and they're 52,000-year-old codes to reactivate the earth, to say that we're ready for ascension. And I've carried those bundles all over the planet to certain places during specific alignments. And the bundles say it's not about giving our approval to things that feel imbalanced, but it is through the acceptance of what is in the moment that we align with the power to transform what is. So I'll say that again, through our acceptance of what is, it brings us into alignment with a power that has the capacity to transform what is. And so if we're living in this feedback loop between us and some greater mind or consciousness, our feedback is directly related to our perception. So if I'm perceiving something from a reactive or a repressive nature, rather than perceiving it from neutrality, I'm going to give feedback to the greater mind. And the greater mind in a system of duality will just keep ping-ponging my reactive or repressive nature back somewhere. It's like the ripples, the waves in the pond are just going to keep going and going and going. If I take responsibility to learn neutrality, which is to find my center, to find stillness, to find wholeness, all the great teachings take us back to this, then I can perceive what is. I become clear eyes for the greater mind to observe through me what is, so that the greater mind that is not existing in dualistic perception based on morals can make shifts through me. I can instantaneously shift what is from neutrality by taking my focus off that which I don't choose with discernment and placing it directly on that which I choose with discernment. This is how powerful we are, and this is going to tie into that whole thing about the missile, which is why the guidance started the conversation. We'll probably end on that note, whenever end is. But this is how powerful we are to transform our reality instantaneously, simultaneously in our moment of observation. And we just believe in time, and we have disempowered ourselves to forget how powerful we are to transform something. This is why the things we're talking about, the tools that we're sharing to get ourselves back into stillness first and foremost, that's primary. Even in the teachings of Jesus and the Pistis Sophia and these many texts, why is water so important now? Because we're learning to still the waters of our own bodies, our own beings. Once we learn to still ourselves, then we can still everything else by literally, here's a great metaphor, we're all in our own motherships and we're driving them around, and they levitate and they teleport and they do all kinds of cool things. So the ship has the capacity, if it's heading in one direction, it has the capacity, if we're looking that direction going, oh, I'm going into a blazing sun, I don't want to drive my ship into that, can instantaneously direct it into the Garden of Eden and land the ship there. That's where our power resides as sovereign, integral, co-creative collaborators of creation. And this is how powerful we are. And it's why Joe Dispenza for a long time said, you know, we've been killed and slaughtered, and God knows we've done it to ourselves and each other and blah, blah, blah. And so we started to, in our memory, become afraid to be in our full power. But if ever there was a time for our light to shine, it's now, by embracing our power to transform. And so where do we get the opportunity to do the groundwork and the homework? Inside of ourselves, with ourselves first and foremost. Because if we're the one freaking out, when we're the spiritual guy on stage telling everyone how to be spiritual, and then we go in the back room and we're freaking out on all of our staff all the time, we're not walking the talk. And so that's non-integrous. There's no authenticity there. And that's why, you know, everything comes out in the news eventually and so on, that we all thought this guy was great, and turns out he's, you know, involved in sexual slavery or whatever. So we use ourselves as the homework assignment, because we have to begin with being responsible for who we are being in the moment. And as we learn neutrality, we can speak with discernment. Source will speak powerfully through us. So even though what we might be saying to the egoic, dualized mind is not popular, and that's what makes us the resistant prophet, when we start to come to that place of neutrality, we can walk into a room and deliver a message that is not popular and transform the entire room and walk out, even though there will be grumbling as we exit the room. And that's okay, because the transformation is already occurring, and we can continue to go on and put out the fires and restore balance and harmony every which way. And my DNA communicates with your DNA, and so on and so on. So when I make the transformation within me, the transformation goes out to all of life. So we have to start with ourselves. That's where, because we are the walking movie theater. We don't have to like what we see, though. Just accepting it allows the transformation to begin.
I think that it was very beautifully put, and I agree with it because I give the example of learning martial arts as a kid, where in high school or whatever, if somebody's going to talk smack to me, then I got to fight them, right? And then I go to a bar and I decide that I'm not going to fight this guy, but he calls me stupid face, and so I fight him then because nobody can call me stupid face. And so then the next time I get past that and he calls me stupid face, and then I'm angry, but I don't do anything, and then maybe he says something else, and then I fight him, and then eventually I'm just holding the anger. But then eventually it gets to this point where I'm just wondering what is wrong with this human being, and I have this compassion for them that there's something obviously off. And so that energy doesn't light up. And a little bit more of a serious example would just be when you think about gang violence and red Bloods and Crips, red and blue, which is it's just whatever, it's just two different things. And you kill my brother, and so I got to kill your brother, right? And then you kill my son, and then it's just this never-ending battle that goes until somebody has the courage and the awareness and the strength to forgive that other person really, so that no more goes on. So they are going to eat that immense amount of pain and hurt and suffering to say, hey, let's end this. Like, I'm not going to retaliate for real. Let's stop. Like, we're the same here. And so that takes an immense amount of courage, and it takes an immense amount of strength to do something like that. So I think it's really important that we are able to do that. That we really start within first, and yeah, divine neutrality. I've heard from Sandra Walter quite a few times, and it's something that I work on as well, as seeing this horrible stuff, but not putting my energy towards it as like this raging maniac, because I'm just depleting myself, and I lose my power, and I lose my ability to make change. And that's how you can make really effective change. So I agree with that. And what I was going to share is Infinity was asking a question, so I know that she really wanted me to ask you questions, so I'm going to make sure I get at least one. But she says, so we speak of us being a group collective consciousness. Oh, is she gonna just say it on air? She can do that if she wants.
She's not in the room with me right now.
Okay, so we'll ask this question. This is from her. You guys are friends, but it's a good question, so I'll ask it. So we speak of being a group collective consciousness. How does that apply with a missile launch alert on Kauai? How does it apply when in relationship to another? So, I kind of shared a little bit of that because I saw the question. And how do we live in harmony and peace with other people, other versions of us, and fully live in a peaceful planet? Go.
Amazing question. Dear Infinity, it's so great because this is the perfect timing and bringing this missile launch into it, because there was a message that came out to everyone in the Hawaiian Islands, at least on the island of Kauai. I haven't watched the news clips on it or anything, but a message came out the day after I arrived on the island here, and it was in the morning, and it said that there was a direct missile launch coming towards the islands, and that it was not a false alarm. And my own personal work externally on this journey has been it was activated from this island of Kauai where I am right now. I went swimming in a cave on the island of Kauai, and water turned me on and woke me up in an instant and said, here's what I need you to do, and here's where I need you to go. And that was the beginning of me walking away from my rational journey and my rational story. Because just like you, Matt, the messages turned on so strongly inside of me and started telling me to go do these things that made no sense to my rational, seemingly perfect life. But the magnetism of the messages was so strong, I started doing it, and it's been the most mystical 7-year, 13-part science fiction movie, which, it's been worth it because it's been the great adventure. And
part of this journey has been working with what I call the grids and ley lines of the earth, or the indigenous refer to them as the song lines, and they're very directly connected into the water and so on. And so on that journey that I've been on, praying with water, working with different indigenous elders and working with other groups on the planet, you know, being pulled into the families of the royals and so on, basically the journey has been about showing up from a place of love, regardless of what is happening, wherever I've come to. And in some of the places that I've ended up, my dear and closest reflections saying to me, are you safe, like doing this stuff that you're doing? And including climbing military fences to go pray with water aquifers. And I always say, I don't know safe, I just know love. And so love is a choice. And it comes back to this piece about accepting what is, and then through neutrality, with discernment, choosing. And so that morning of, I was guided to fly here on, many of us connected into the numerology of this time and space quantum field that we're playing inside of. We call Earth, some call the Matrix, and so on. We just passed another gateway, January the 11th. It was 1/11/11. And I was on Vancouver Island, which in the grids is a very important place. And the guidance said, do ceremony at 11:11 a.m. on Vancouver Island, which for grid workers we know as Albion, carrying the codes of Avalon. It's the restoration of the union of the masculine and the feminine. And the guidance said, do ceremony on Vancouver Island, then get on a plane and fly to Kauai and do ceremony at 11:11 p.m. And you'll arc the energies, and it will help for whatever is coming, and you'll understand why. And so I did ceremony in the morning, flew here. My friend Infinity picked me up at the airport. We quickly went to the earth, to the beach, and we did an earth ceremony. And people who do ceremonies, a lot of the teachings of the elders, whether it's Gnostic wisdom or mystery schools or indigenous elders or whatever wisdom keepers, really all that we're all teaching or sharing is that life is about intentionality. And so if we show up willy-nilly with no intentionality behind what we're doing, and you know this as an athlete, it's like a really good friend of mine, Mike Malley, was a pro BMXer, and he always used to say, like, you got to see yourself landing before you ever take the jump. Because if you don't see yourself landing before you take the jump, don't even bother taking the jump. So part of us reclaiming our power is about learning to be intentional. And how do we get intentional? By first of all, stilling our reactive nature, learning techniques to come into a whole brain state so that we can be more aware and awake of the circumstances of the moment, and then choose each moment with intentionality. And the missile launch moment, the moment, so all of our ceremonies that we've done on the earth, from myself all around the planet, the ceremonies that Infinity's been doing for a long time, we do them with intentionality. We do them in the knowing that we are making a difference just by consciously choosing what we're doing in the moment with our ceremonies. And so we have done many conscious ceremonies, and the moment of the missile launch message coming on everyone's text message was a moment of going, oh, I see how all the pieces fit and why the guidance said to do the ceremony here, then come here at 11:11, like everything fit together. And in that moment for me, I just looked at that potential and went, no, and turned my potential over here and went, that was a potential timeline in some existence called his story. No, Just simply no. And so in this realm that you and I having this conversation are existing in right now, enough of us as sovereign, integral creators of our reality could witness that potential and say no and turn our focus to a different potential, to the garden, the restoration of the garden, Eden, paradise, heaven on earth, whatever. In some other existence, did that missile go off? Yeah, there's infinite possibilities. But this is where we're remembering our power collectively. And once we start to remember how to play this quantum game, it starts to get fun. Because in some past existence, we would have freaked out and gone, oh my God, and then empower that. But once we really start to get our stride, we are becoming the self-realized, awakened beings of our creation. This is just where it's starting to get fun now. Because now we've remembered the dynamics of how the reality works. Now we can begin to play in the field of love and wholeness and say, what's possible? And as sovereign beings, if we want to have an experience, we can choose it. If we want to experience the missile, we can choose it. From a higher state of consciousness, it's called Acauasal, and there's nothing moral inside of an Acauasal reality. It's just choice to have an experience and then move on and choose another experience and another experience. And so that in our reality that's called Matt Belair, anyone who's tuning into this show, Infinity who's in another room, we all chose a different reality, and that's how truly powerful we really are. And this is a moment to go, hey, let's celebrate our hero's journey. Because your question previous about saying, have we gotten close to this point before and not quite gone over? Let's say that the missile launch was a definite yes. That we've gotten to the point before and we've never made it past the missile launch. But those of us who are interfacing and experiencing ourselves as existing, you and I on a podcast and so on, we actually chose to go on. We chose life. We chose collaboration. We chose love. We chose play. We chose creativity. We choose. And this starts to meld realities. It starts to get like really irritating and confusing to the mind that's in linear time, what's coming through this talk right now. It's actually mind numbing. It kind of puts us to sleep. But there's a purpose to this transmission right now because it's meant to dissolve all the separation that's perceived by the mind so that a vaster expanse of the energetic consciousness known as oneness can meet here now. So what I would say about this part of the transmission or the sharing is just don't hold on to anything that was just said right now because it's coming from a more unified field of consciousness that's not meant to be understood or understood by the mind, just received and synthesized. And a greater experience will come from this part of the transmission. And so we bless we, the version of we, that created the potential of a missile to even come here so we could have this moment of now to transform even greater into a collective thought field called unity, where we can truly begin to play as children in the garden restored, co-creators and collaborators of creation, given back our authority to create potential and possibility, called art, the refinement of the human journey, the hero's journey into the opening of the heart. And we made it. And how do we know? Because we're here right now. And this is where it all truly begins.
Okay. Oh my God. All right. So I got something. So this is that's I think that even when I was in Egypt, Nassim Haramein was saying things that I was picking up on, and I'm not allowed to share all of them. It's like red flag or whatever. A couple podcasts ago, we were talking about the pyramids being these energy grids, and we use that technology. Let's just say that we were there, we used it. So it gets pretty 5D gnarly. But I was talking to Chris Almeida, who's the director, such a fantastic guy.
I know Chris.
Oh yeah, of course you do. He's the man.
Yeah.
Big hug. So I was like, hey Chris, like I think only maybe 20% of the people know what's going on here. And he's like, I'd say that's a generous estimate. And I was like, oh, really interesting, because I was kind of piecing all these things together and just kind of looking around. I was like, is this the thing? Like, is this actually what I imagined? So with this, if I'm hearing you and just piecing it together in my brain, it seems like this missile's happening, and then through a collective of people, it gets consciously, through free will, evaporated in sorts some way. I actually just talked about this. David Lone Bear, who is a native elder of the Mi'kmaq Nation, told me, I ended up calling him randomly after it was like a missile in the summer launched either by USA towards Korea or some crap like that. Somebody launched a missile. And I ended up talking to David. Yeah, the next day, and he's like, did you hear about the missile? I was like, no. Like, what's going on? I was like, do you have something to do with that? He's like, yeah, we had something to do with making sure that it fell down. So whether it's this 5D ceremony, whether it's ETs, I don't know. I don't know. It's beyond me. But again, I've been to the realms where I told my friend, once you do ayahuasca, you could say that I saw a leprechaun riding a unicorn over a rainbow to a party with big feet and fairies, and I wouldn't even question it. I would ask where it was, what did they look like, what other information do you have, because it shatters the 3D brain and everything you think is reality. It shatters it, and for sure that this is not the reality. This is a fraction of a fraction. So to continue, I'm been referencing the books because there's 6 books, the Life and Teaching of the Masters of the Far East, and that is mind-blowing. And the segue to that is the Autobiography of a Yogi, which is also mind-blowing. It's like Autobiography of a Yogi on steroids. And as this guy is traveling with these masters, they're confronted with what do they call back in the day, these gangs on horses or whatever. They just marauders, yeah, robbers, right? And this is supposed to be real stuff, and I totally think it is. They're going to get these marauders. Somebody comes back, and the masters are like, just chill, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Nothing is going to happen to us. You don't have to worry. And everybody's freaking out in the village, and the master's like, just chill out. We're fine. And so, then the marauders come, and basically one of the masters goes out, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to deal with this. And so as I'm piecing this together, he goes out, and he basically, when they explain it to you, I'm going to butcher this. You got to read the book, because when you read the words, it's so resonant. But the bottom line is along the lines that, divine neutrality, connection with source as the creator, that no other thing can impede on your sovereignty is what you're saying, ideally. And, basically this huge storm happens. Everybody gets, they end up killing each other, all this kind of stuff, and all the village is fine. But he always gives them the opportunity to not do it. So there's multiple stories in that book where people attain this level of mastery where the outside world, this is yogi fifth dimensional stuff, which is where I aim to go. Basically, it doesn't matter. In the same way, Coop Blackson, who's been on the podcast twice, he grew up with his dad being a healer in Africa, like a miracle healer, like people being blind and can't walk and things like that. And our first podcast, he like kind of brushed over it, right? He's like, yeah, blah, blah, because I didn't know who he was. They had reached out to me to do the podcast. And he's like, yeah, my dad was like this healer in Africa, healed people of blindness stuff, blah, blah, blah. I kept going. I was like, wait, hold on. Did you just say your dad just like heal people of blindness and things like that? Let's go into that for a second before we brush over that. But in the only answer you could really say, it's connecting with the source, God, nature, something beyond, connecting to that and knowing the wholeness and the perfection that is here now to draw in that power. So if you did that as a collective, kudos. And I'm so down. And the interesting thing, too, about the native cultures, what I've been learning from David Lombert and a couple other people, but mostly him, is the ancient wisdom that they have of you've got the ayahuasqueros in Peru working with this like kind of multi-dimensional nature. You've got indigenous people over the planet, with lineage of thousands of years or hundreds of years. I don't know how long it is. But it's, this culture and this power is this real connection to spirit that to them is as real as, getting hit by a bus. It's very, very real, and it's very, very definite. And they know that because they experience it in the same way that, I know that I can create my reality, and I know that this is not too far from me because of what I've experienced directly. And then my conscious, rational mind has got no chance. There's no way. It's like, a 3-year-old trying to figure out a Rubik's Cube with, 1,000 pieces per side. It's just not ever happening, so.
My dad's been with a 3-year-old faster than you and I.
Yeah, totally.
Likely.
So that's some heavy crap. So the one thing I'm going to ask then is, like, do you think that was a planetary turning point? For me, being in this space for quite a while, for I'd say especially the last 10 years, I've heard that, we're going through this ascension time, and there's like this clock, there's like a time for this portal for a window, and then in ancient texts it talks about the splitting of the worlds. In the Bible it talks about the veil. So it's all linear. It's, every ancient book is saying it in a different way. And for me, every master that I have on that I respect and think is telling me, they have like the sight, they're saying the same thing in different ways. So for you, was this a turning point on what is possible for who is still here now to now build the new earth at an accelerated rate that we can connect to this power? Because I think it was you a few podcasts ago, and I've heard it over and over. Same with Tom Campbell, actually, because he talks about simulation theory. But if we're creating our reality over and over and over and over and over again, instantly, like frames, not one linear moment, if we connected as a group, we could stop perpetuating this old story pretty quick and create a new story, which is why I believe, I've studied media and psychology and persuasion, but when you keep taking in the war and you keep taking in like North Korea is going to bomb us, no, it's Osama bin Laden, no, it's, I don't know, Santa Claus, no, it's, it's Canada is going to get you now, no, it's Russia, no, like who gives a crap? But we keep perpetuating some sort of enemy over and over, so people are taking this information and then throwing it back out into the field, and we're all sitting in it because they're not bringing enough consciousness into what they're putting out. So I don't know where I was going with that. I've been going for a bit. So you say something.
Great run.
I thought I was going to finish it like nice and sweet with a button, but I got distracted with the last one. Shoot. Almost. It was a good try.
You're so good and fun, Matt. I love hanging with you. I love hanging with you and all of your viewers. Well, great wrap. And yes to everything you said. And, the one piece for me is always continuing that word they, always bringing it back to me or we versus they. So then, is it possible for a group of us to get together? What's actually happening is that when the caterpillar turns into the butterfly, the cells, the whole inside of the caterpillar turns into liquid. All the boundaries dissolve of the organs and the cells and the structures.
So as that's happening inside of us, which it is, because how did the masters of the Far East teleport and levitate and do all their mystical things? They reached a level of consciousness beyond vibration where everything stopped vibrating and those things that create structure dissolved. And their consciousness had the capacity to play with form by moving itself into and out of vibration. So as we come to that place of moving into and out of vibration, everything around us shifts and changes because everything is us, and we are transforming the external from the internal process. There is the coding in the human DNA. There's 64 building blocks. The 60th building block is exactly about this. It's the gifts of Babaji, where he was seen throughout time and space. Throughout different moments in history, he would appear and disappear. And this is the gene that talks about Acauasal, meaning that in this experience that we're currently in of duality, we have morals. And the morals rate and guide the distance between the polarities. And so once we transcend duality, we go into an Acauasal level of consciousness that doesn't operate on morals. Really what you could say morals are just kind of a push-pull inside of the psyche to hold things together, but it's kind of like a water balloon. Like the water balloon is kind of like always going like this. So there's some kind of force or inertia that just kind of keeps holding it at center while it does all of its exploration of all of its possible forms. The 60th gene says that when the gift, the highest frequency of that gift, activates in a collective of us, in an instant, it's called the Earthship Merkaba and the cracking of the vessel. And in an instant, the Earthship cracks, the reality dissolves. When enough of us reach that state. And what does that mean? Well, there's this video that I share with people, and it's a man in his bedroom. He's got a speaker on his bed, and he runs a tone generator through it, playing 525 and 528 hertz together, unified. And a gateway starts to open up in his room, a stargate. Starts with just a line of vibration. People look at it and they go, well, it's cool, but it's not real. It's like, well, actually, it is real. How does an opera singer break crystal with their voice? Because they hit a particular octave that affects the vibrational ratio of time and space and transcends it. We have the same capacity when a collective of the communal cells that are currently existing reach the Acauasal state or the acidic state of the 60th gene, at which point this reality dissolves away and the consciousness finds itself in a new place, a new experience. Once again, it can't be comprehended from the mind, but we can plant seeds out there in front of the mind for the mind to ponder and sit in awe of until the moment that it actually occurs. And parts of our consciousness are already sourcing from there. You could say our future selves are on the other side, the opening, and they keep passing their hand through. And at one point, they're going to grab a hold of our shirt collar and pull us right through. But they're wonders of the mind, not resolvable. These concepts are not resolvable by the mind. And is it coming, and has it already happened in infinite ways? Yes. And so the joy is once we get to these places where we stop being so serious with our mind, trying to comprehend and contemplate, and we start to just like relax and look at the potential and the possibility and just allow ourselves to relax into it, that in itself, that's why imagination is so important, because imagination allows our physical vessels to relax. And in that relaxation, the spirit and the matter come into a greater unification. And that's what the masters of the Far East were doing, allowing that merging to exist. There's this really beautiful video that I saw recently, and it's of a man standing in front of a charging elephant. And it's a huge elephant, and it's charging right at him, and he's holding this spaciousness of neutrality, of stillness, of peace, inner peace. And the elephant charges, and then it stops like maybe 20 feet in front of him. And then he kind of turns and looks at the camera, and then the elephant takes one more charge, and this charge is like even more intense. And he just kind of casually waves this little bamboo stick at it. And the elephant backs away. So what is this showing us? It's showing us that at this level of consciousness, everything comes from the source, the one. And what is motivating, inspiring, giving life to that elephant is the same thing that's motivating, inspiring, and giving life to the man with the bamboo stick. And that's where they're meeting. And the rest is the great illusion called play. It just stopped feeling like play because we got our emotions into it, separated from the mental body. And we began to experience it in a different way. And so at this place, this is a very refined place to actually experiment and explore with the reality in this place of oneness, of unity, where we can begin to think apple, produce apple in the palm of the hand, and sit in the awe of it, because the only way that we can attain it is through the awe. And that which resides inside of the awe is truly beyond languaging, because now we're in the experience of creation within. And as conscious as we can be without completely dissolving back into it. This is the experience of being in the garden together.
Well, oh my goodness. I agree with you again, and it's a really powerful way to share, a lot of the concepts that I'm familiar with. So I 100% agree with all that. I feel like that's where we're moving. It was really beautifully put, so I don't feel like I can chime in and add anything on that. Just give you a thumbs up. But yeah, I see that. It's such a fascinating journey. One of the things that came up was I went on an Alan Watts binge recently, and in one of the lectures he just talked about, this decision when you're pondering life and you realize that you're going to die, right? At that point, when you realize that this death in the human body, you have a choice whether to make everything super serious or to enjoy your experience. And he's like, it seems like most people have just chosen to be super serious about life, to make everything, every emotion, every decision, every experience, it's all very serious when, it's meant to be a play. We're meant to explore. And, even when I have these debates with people and people have different points of view, I really liked Tim Freak talked about it as well. But it's like, if you're going to share this with a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old, like, what's your philosophy of life? And if it doesn't apply or make sense to a 6-year-old, then it probably doesn't apply or make sense to you. There's just some sort of story or condition that we've accepted from cultural conditioning or whatever the case is that we agree to. And we can choose to drop that. And so, think apple, produce apple. That's a concept, same with the 4-minute mile. You have to be able to believe that you can do it in order to do it, or there's no chance. for me, I can say, on healing my body and what I've been able to do personally on that level is pretty fascinating. But it starts with me telling myself that I can heal myself of anything. Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, the same thing. People doing miracles, right? But it starts with belief, and you can't pass go or collect 200. Whatever you're gonna believe is gonna mirror in your reality. So how far can you push that? And that's been my pursuit. I want to know how far I can push it for myself, most importantly. And I'm also curious of people pushing it that I can talk to, like you, Wim Hof doing things like that. If Bruce Lee were alive, just, when I trained in China with these Shaolin monks breaking stone with 2 fingers, how far can we push this reality in what is real and what is not? And so I think the power of it is keeping an open mind to possibility and making it heart-centered, because the illusion and the stress and the seriousness all comes in a mind, and it all comes in the form of a story. And then we attach our identity and who we think we are in this play or game, but we just dub ourselves a serious character. Everything is so serious. And at the same time, you could drop all that and, like creating an avatar, create a brand new avatar with new belief systems, with new structures, and the whole game will change. And that's, I think, a little bit of what you're referring to and how powerful we are. And Tom Campbell talking about the hologram or living in a simulation, he's saying the same thing through a physics perspective and saying he 100% believes we're in a simulation. And so he's a smart guy, but it's the same freaking concept. He talks it all about love being the driving force. If you can connect to that stillness and you start to uncode, recode, unpack what your body is capable of, this avatar. And one of the ways that I put it, it's like we're in this avatar. Let's say it's a fishing game or a game where in the ocean, and we've been given an avatar where we believe we're goldfish. And so we have goldfish thoughts and we do goldfish things, and it's all right. But we're actually dolphins. And for you to understand the ability of a dolphin from a goldfish, you can't even fathom it. You're jumping out of the water. You have sonar now. You're connecting to your homies so far away. You have an understanding of the entire ocean. You've got all new friends. Life is great. And but what's happening is we're just turning those abilities on. And if you are a dolphin, the first thing you got to recognize that you're more than a goldfish, that story – what the abilities that they gave you the dolphin suit, which is the human body, but they told you it was a goldfish suit. And so with that awareness is your first step to even having the possibility of upgrading your consciousness, your life, and your human experience. And I'll just close it with if even if you think the other way, we just die, then don't you want to explore what you're capable of? Don't you want to explore what life is to you? Don't you want to give it your best shot, on what your heart tells you, on who you actually are? Are you being honest with who you are? And I think if you can do those things, it might not be the easiest journey, but it's going to be the one where you look yourself in the mirror at death, and those are the things you're going to be asking yourself. So, it's like be proud of yourself, be confident in yourself, and they are really simple steps, and I know how hard it can be, but the alternative of looking at yourself in the mirror and not listening to your own guidance and your own love is just you doing it to you. And then actually the last thing that I'll say too, because it reminded me of the Kupal accent I was going to say before, but he talks about, a lot of the people who listen to this, they'll ask me about how do you have these mystical experiences or whatever. It's not about that. It really is about seeing the absolute awe in what life is now. It's all around you every moment, pure miraculous existence. It's all amazing. And the more you connect with that energy of like how just amazing it is to be alive and just to look around and all the things happening, if you just tune in, like that is magical enough, it's so magical. And as you tune into that resonance, it's going to say, oh, you think that's good? Check this out. And so it'll just allow more information through your awareness because you're saying, I'm paying attention, I'm listening. And so then you can interact with the field, with consciousness, with nature. with all that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna just you can add on to that if you like. We've been going for a while. I have actually more questions, but do you want to add on to that before
I
I
do.
address
There's
them?
a couple things I want to add. Wow, you trained with the Shaolin monks?
Yeah, in China, legit masters.
That's that's always been on my list.
It's
I'm
amazing. It's
impressed.
hard. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's so cool. Um, Coot Blackson, I just want to comment on Coot because his video, The Miracle, saved my life. It really saved my life. Joe Dispenza saved my life. Infinity, my dear friend, Infinity Possibilities saved my life. Um, on the journey, in as we're learning to find neutrality, it's possible to go through real ups and downs. I'm just guided to share that. Stick with it because eventually we're going to find center. And the moment we do it, it's exactly the same as the moment that we learn to ride the bicycle without the training wheels or snowboard down the slope or whatever. It's the same thing. So stick with it. Yeah, sometimes we fall, we get bumps and bruises, but stick with it. Just that simple. Coot has a video out called The Miracle Is You. And that is such a great video for anyone to watch because it goes through all the statistics of the human body and how profound the human body is. And I invite listeners to tune into that if they're having a lousy day, because that song really saved my life. And Coot Blackson came into my world in some very miraculous ways. And one of them was in the LA airport when I was coming back to North America after traveling for 3 months through Europe doing water blessings. And it was on an 11/11. It was 11/11 a couple of years ago. And the guidance said, fly from the old world to the new with the waters to activate the turtle, to liberate the dove. And really, in 2011, Coot Blackson's video saved my life when I had gone so super expansive high in my Kundalini naturally that I went into the dark night of the soul. And his video, The Miracle Is You, was a lifesaver. And Joe Dispenza showed it as an opening video at one of his workshops. And so for me to fly into LA with this sacred water that I had been exchanging all around the world and carrying bundles for the indigenous and so on for several years, to walk through the customs and walk out and literally bump into Coot Blackson at that moment of bringing this sacred water home to Turtle Island to activate Turtle Island. It was an amazing moment for me to just like literally walk into the arms of this man and go, Coot Blackson, your video saved my life. And now I'm completing this epic sojourn with water and the grids and the ley lines and so on. And so it was very profound. And I just wanted to give a little bit of kudos to Coot Blackson and your experience with him. And for people to check out his work, it's very encouraging. He's also a great motivational speaker and so on, but just his music is great. And what came to mind right now while I was listening to your sharing, inviting the listeners and all of us to do this. Either we come back on a podcast and we join together in a meditation, or we just put the potential out in time and space. There's a very special window coming in linear time and space, which we're moving beyond in gravity, on the 31st of January. It's a new moon. It's a full moon. It's a blue moon, and it's also a lunar eclipse. And so many astrologers are watching this window, and many of us have been really tuned into it energetically as a profound moment of collective quantum leap. So my invitation in this moment is just because you said, like, if a collective of us come together, let's just put out a coordinate in time and space and invite anyone who ever listens to this podcast, whether it is before or after that moment, to collectively meet us there, beyond time and space, to join us in the potential of what's possible in the presence of love and wholeness, the restoration of our sovereignty, our true birthright as multi-dimensional beings, to restore our sovereign nature as unified and equal co-creators and collaborators of our story, not history or her story, but our story. Meet us there, in that place beyond all of this. And let's open up that window to create something beautiful together. And that's what I'm guided to invite in just listening to your final sharings. And we can continue on with more questions, but that piece feels very holistic to me about what brought us together today, is to make that offering and the restoration of this amazing place, thing, creation called the Living Library, where all life forms are welcome, who reside in the presence of love and benevolence and reverence for the holistic well-being of all of life throughout